Hi, my name is Reyna Araibi and I'm the Communications Manager at the Colibrí Center for Human Rights. At Colibrí, we've been thinking a lot about this phrase, Migrar es amar. To migrate is to love. I think for me to be able to express what that phrase means to me, I have to start by sharing with you that I'm the daughter of immigrants. Although my mother isn't an immigrant herself, she's the product of immigration by past generations. She keeps the same beautiful brown skin and the same name and language and traditions of her cultural heritage. In the US, she's often defined as an other. Sometimes she's confused as being Mexican, but she's always and uniquely Mexican-American. That's the part of who I am that I think that I express the most, especially in my work with families searching for missing loved ones on the border. I use my language and my mannerisms and my norms of that part of my cultural heritage, but it's only half of my immigrant past. My father came to the US when he was only 19 years old. He grew up the middle child of a large family in a small town in Lebanon, and having done so, he'd love to tell you stories of how he studied for exams by candlelight when there was no longer any electricity. Or at least that's what he liked to tell me when I didn't want to study for school. But he'd also tell you stories of what it was like to represent and embody in many ways the hopes and dreams of his working class family. He'd tell you stories of violent and scary civil wars, of poverty, of all of the hard work that he did and that my grandfather did to introduce him to the right people so that he could have the opportunity that he did, which was to come and study at university in the United States. So many times I feel like my father's immigrant past is so distant from all of the work that I do in immigration activism. And in many ways it absolutely is. Although his journey wasn't easy, it was very distinct from the journey of thousands of people who clandestinely cross borders. However, I think that among the threads that connect them is the beautiful courage and tenacity to believe in oneself so much that you leave everything you've ever known in search of a future that is by no means guaranteed and will undoubtedly require continued and probably very painful sacrifice. I think that to fight for oneself requires a special kind of tenacity that isn't as often glorified as the kind of tenacity required in self-sacrifice, especially when it comes to migration and to migrants. It's absolutely true that migration is very rarely an individual decision, and it's almost never made with only oneself in mind. My father dared to imagine that he could succeed in a country where he didn't speak the language, where he didn't understand the customs, and that was more than 7,000 miles away from everything that he'd ever known. But if you ask him about it, to this day he'll tell you that it was because he wanted to fight for his family. He wanted to create a future where he could provide for his mother and his father and his sister and his two brothers and all of the nieces and nephews that were around and were yet to come. He, like so many other migrants, sat down and had really hard conversations with his family where they decided to separate from one another in the hope that something better might be possible. Like so many other people, he left with his heart full of the love that he had for his family and that they had for him. I think that those family-centered narratives are important and they're beautiful and they're truthful and they should be talked about. But I think that we also have to talk about the love that migrants have for themselves, especially in today's world. A world where migrants are criminalized and demonized and homogenized. We're living in a global community where every dominant narrative tells the migrant that they're simple, that they're not important, that they are dispensable. And in that kind of context, I think that to believe in oneself so intensely and to love oneself so much that you act on that belief, that's a radical act of resistance. I think when we decided to focus on this phrase, Migrar es amar, it was because we had both types of love in mind. The love of family and the love of self, because we recognize the importance and the beauty and the intensity of both those kinds of love. If we want to honor and respect migration, we have to be able to see all parts of that story, all complex, beautiful, individual, unique parts of that story. My name is Reyna Araibi, and I believe that to migrate is to love. Migrar es amar.